Thank you for joining me. The introit for this Sunday, September 13th, is from Psalm 143. Deliver me from my enemies, O Lord. I have fled to you for refuge. Hear my prayer, O Lord. Give ear to my pleas for mercy. In your faithfulness, answer me. In your righteousness, enter not into judgment with your servant, for no one living is righteous before you. The structure of this very short introit is what stands out to me. At the beginning, we have a very simple ask from the psalmist: deliver me from my enemies. And we don't know what exactly those enemies are. It could be a person or people. It could be someone who wishes harm or destruction upon him. It could also mean someone who wishes to tempt the person to do something unwise or sinful. Now, the point of the beginning of this psalm is that the psalmist has a problem. And when we face problems, where do we turn? For whatever the reason, I tend to enjoy problem solving. If there is a technical or mechanical issue, I am inclined to try to figure out the problem and fix it. And usually there's a sequence that one follows when trying to figure out what is wrong. And that sequence is determined by a process of elimination. If not this, then maybe that, and so on and so forth. However, in the midst of trouble, do we ever turn to God first? Or do we try to problem solve on our own? Now, after the psalmist identifies the problem, he states, I have fled to you for refuge. Now, what this tells us is that the trouble that he faces is not something that he can fix. There's no troubleshooting here. In fact, the more he tries to find a solution to his trouble on his own, the more frustrated he will become. Instead, the only way the psalmist is going to find safety is to flee the trouble and find refuge in God. And the two words flee and refuge are strong images. To flee is to run away from an impending doom. Now, there are a large number of fires, of dangerous fires in California. And if you read the articles about the fires, you'll find stories about people fleeing for their lives. The image of fleeing is that this happens when there is immediate danger. These enemies, whatever they are very real. They are a very real and dangerous threat for this psalmist. However, because of his commitment to God, he knows exactly where he can go for safety. He goes to God. There's nothing he can do in order to protect himself. And because of that, he turns to God. With God, there is refuge. And if we think of refuge, in that we have a strong image of safety. To have refuge is to have relief and safety. And why does the psalmist find refuge in God? Because God has the power to take care of the problem. Yet, the psalmist brings up a possible stumbling block that can sometimes be placed in front of us when we seek the safety of God. And that stumbling block is the question of worthiness. And I can't tell you how many times I get annoyed at the more modern literature or TV shows that portray someone who is at their wits' end and they don't know where else to turn. So they decide to do something crazy and pray. And in their prayer, they say that if they have done anything that was good, please act on that. However, that thought echoes this idea of worthiness. And the thought that you need to be worthy in order to get something from God. God, if I've done anything that's good, that can compel you to help me just this once. And also goes the other way. I'm not a good person. I'm not worthy to pray to God. So why do I even bother? But the psalmist states very succinctly that it's not anything he's done. This psalmist appeals to God's faithfulness and the love that God has for his people. The fact is, no one is worthy to ask God of anything, and yet he still tells his people to ask. When we go before God, we bring nothing with us. And when we think we have something worthy of him, we're quickly put in our place. The psalmist knows that he is at the mercy of God. But he also calls God his refuge, because he knows that God will indeed hear his prayer and listen and act. That action might surprise us, but God will act. In times of trouble, flee to God. And know that you don't have to meet a certain standard in order for God to listen. All you have to do is ask. Thank you for joining me.